Hey everyone, Dave Corinth here. Have you ever tried to make a tote for a plane? Well, it can be tricky, and the hardest part is drilling the holes. Well, I have a jig for that. Makes it a whole lot easier. But I want to make some improvements on this jig. So today I'm going to build a new jig, and I'm going to show you how I build that new jig so you can build one at home if you want a tote making jig as well. So this is my tote making jig, and really it's not a tote making jig as much as it is a hole drilling jig. And what this does, this allows me to use my drill press without tilting the table, put this in there, and then drill straight down. And because the tote is at a certain angle, in this case 27 degrees, I don't have to worry about tilting the table on my drill press as it'll drill it straight down. And before anyone makes any comments, I want to go ahead and nip this in the bud. I am well aware that Lee Valley makes this template for free that you can download. And it lets you make a tote without having to tilt the drill press. Here's the problem that I have with that. If you put the template on the board, the grain runs this direction, which is not the way they ran on the old Stanley planes. You can see on this one, the grain runs parallel with the sole. And just to me, when I see a tote and the grain runs this direction, I know it was made on a Lee Valley template, or at least that it was drilled with the board like that, straight down. And I don't like doing it that way. I like to do it the way that Stanley did it. I think it looks better, and it's just my opinion. So I am not in any way degrading anyone that uses the Lee Valley template or makes a tote in that way. I just like to make them this way. So this is the materials we're going to use for this project. I have 2 pieces of Honduras mahogany that are 3/4 of an inch thick, 4 5/8 of an inch wide, and 5 inches long. I have a piece of black walnut that's 7/8 of an inch thick, and this is what we're going to use to make those angle blocks. I have 3 carriage bolts. These are bronze rubbed or something. I'm not really sure what that is, but they're kind of a dark, and I like that. These are 4 inches long, and I only need them to be 3 inches long, so we're going to have to cut a little bit off, but they didn't have any 3 inches when I went to the hardware store. And then I have these little beautiful little nuts that I got off of an old filing cabinet, and they're knurled, and they're kind of decorative, but they were going to throw the filing cabinet away, so I pulled these off just to keep these, and I thought I'd find a use for them someday, and it looks like I have. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is crop the top of this. This allows me to see the hole better when I'm drilling it. And these don't have to be any particular size. And I cut these on my chop saw. I'm also a finish carpenter, so I have a chop saw. Next, I want to cut out these angle blocks. These go at the bottom corner of the jig and allow me to tilt this tote back at the desired degree so that the rod hole is perpendicular to the base when I set it on the drill press. So I've made a little bit of a change here, and it's for safety reasons. Originally I was going to cut these wedges out of a piece of walnut like this. So I was going to cut them into pieces about 3 inches long and then try to cut that miter on the chop saw. And I realized that that gets my fingers a little bit too close to a spinning blade, and I don't want to lose these. Even though I know they're dirty, but they are mine, and I don't want to lose them. So I'm going to cut the wedges out of this piece of black cherry, and I'm going to actually cut them like this. And then I can put this board, after I cut this piece, on the chop saw and cut it the way I want it a lot easier. And a lot safer, keeping my fingers away from that blade. I ended up making 4 of these blocks to cut these wedges out. Even at the end, my finger was just still a little bit too close. And you can see here that slight variation of 1 degree from the very low block of 25 to the high block at 30. The next thing I want to do is test fit the blocks to see where I need to drill these holes. I didn't mention this earlier, but I also bought some small bronze washers. And those are 9/16 of an inch in diameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill some recesses and I'm going to epoxy those washers in place. The diameter of the carriage bolt is 1/4 of an inch, so I'm going to use my little brad point drill bit here to drill all the way through. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to test fit each one of these bronze washers to make sure that there's no interference when those carriage bolts slide through. To drill the hole for the angle blocks, I want to set each angle block in the vise and make sure it's perfectly square. This is crucial. If one of those is off just a little bit, it will not drill that hole correctly. And I use the same brad point drill bit of 1/4 of an inch that I used to drill those holes originally. I'm going to test fit each one to make sure it fits perfect. And again, test fitting some more. I want to make sure those bolts don't interfere with that tote. Before I had some of them written in pencil what the degree was, so on this one I'm going to stamp each one what the degree is, and I'm going to put it on the face so I can see it easier. And for a little fun, I'm going to put my logo on it. I don't want these washers to come off every time I take one of those angle blocks out. So I'm going to epoxy each bronze washer in place, in that recess that was made earlier. And of course, I'm going to test fit it one more time. I want to make sure that when I slide the top plate on, it does not interfere with those carriage bolts. So these are those nuts that I got off of that filing cabinet. And they are threaded 1/4-20, but they don't go all the way through. So I'm just going to drill all the way through and tap the last 1/16 of an inch. You can do this by hand because it's going to basically chase those old threads and then come right through the top. In the process of tapping those, it leaves a little burr on top, and I want to remove it. To do that, I'm just going to take a piece of 220 grit sandpaper on top of some Scotch-Brite. This prevents me from sanding a flat spot on it. And I'm going to use my very fine wire wheel. These have some kind of finish on them, protective to keep them from, I guess, getting fingerprints. And so I'm going to remove that and polish these up a little bit. Next, I want to go ahead and seat each carriage bolt. And you can see here, as I tighten it down, it draws that carriage bolt into the mahogany. This will prevent those bolts from spinning every time I loosen and tighten it with those brass nuts. And of course, I'm going to test it out just to make sure. So the jig is essentially built, but if you haven't caught on to the theme here, I'm going to go ahead and test fit everything one more time. Here, I'm going to slide a tote in and just tighten it, see how easy it is. It's a lot better than having to grab a little wrench every time. Here, I'm just going to remove those table saw marks that was on that mahogany with my block plane. I have to be careful here and make sure I don't take too much off. I'm taking a very small amount. You don't want to get these things out of square. So all I'm doing is just cleaning up those table saw marks. I'm going to use lacquer to finish these. I thought about putting some boiled linseed oil on it or some kind of tongue weld, but these are going to be clamping unfinished pieces of wood, and I don't want that tongue weld or boiled linseed oil to bleed in to the wood that it's clamping down. So I'm just going to use lacquer. This thing's going to get beat up, so I'm not going to get carried away with the finish on it, although I do want it to look nice. And with the angle blocks, all I'm going to do is apply some Johnson's paste wax to them. Once the lacquer's had a chance to dry, I'm going to go ahead and hit each one with some 220 grit sandpaper. This will kind of remove that rattle can look to it. Again, I'm not going to try to make this into a fine piece of furniture because it is going to get beat up. But I want it to look nice, at least at the beginning. And then after the sanding, I'm going to polish each one with some 4/0 steel wool. And then using a cotton cloth, buff each one. And of course, once it's finished, I'm going to assemble the whole thing and test fit each one of those angle blocks. I'm only going to show you one because I don't think you want to see me do it 6 times. So here is our finished tote hole drilling jig with a little angle block in it. I have 5 other angle blocks. These angle blocks range from 25 degrees all the way up to 30 right now. Actually, the 30 is in it because we're going to do a test run on it. This is the tote we're going to drill the holes in. You can see I've got the top bore marked where it's going to come out, and I've got this one marked. This one we'll have to take it out of the jig and drill that one because it has to be perfectly level, but it will get the hard one, which is this one. So let's see how it fits. Like a glove. Now the problem with the old one is this tote stuck up above it, so I could not drill this one down and then turn it upside down to drill the other one. I had to take the tote out. In this one, I can drill this and then flip it around and drill that one. So let's put it on the drill press and see how it works. Now it doesn't take a lot of pressure to hold this in place, just enough to keep it snug. And I am going to go ahead and confess that I do have one of those vices that has an XY axis. And it's not an expensive one. It was like 80 bucks and I bought it off eBay. But it does make lining up the Forstner bit and the Brad Point drill bit to drill these holes a lot easier. So first I drill the hole for the barrel nut, which is 7/16. And next I use a 5/16 Brad Point drill bit to drill about halfway down. Take the jig out, flip it over, snug it up, line it up, and then drill that until it meets the other hole. And now, of course, the moment of truth. It's definitely a lot easier to take out now, and I want to make sure that hole is lined up. And you can see there, it is perfectly. So thank you for watching this video. Right after this, I'm going to make another one that will show the entire process of making one of these totes from scratch. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope it was helpful.